my guests are ready. I just want to welcome all you guys to 10-8 in service, headquarters show me 10-8. I really appreciate you guys being here. And during this time, this was short notice, but you guys were able to make time to come over here. So I greatly appreciate that. And today I got a really all-star cast, man. I really appreciate you guys being here. We got Dr. Nikki Brown, which is the director of Law Enforcement Training Academy in Odessa College, Odessa, Texas. We got my man, Jason Lemon, over Long Beach, executive director for the nonprofit Why Will Stop Me, and my main man, William Bass. Bass, I don't even have to introduce you no more. You've been to the show already, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna have to pay you to be here next time.
Yeah, I'm waiting on my check, brother. I'm waiting on that check.
And from the bottom of my heart, man, I want to appreciate you guys because I know all of my three guests tonight, they get paid to be in platforms like this. They get paid. So I'm not paying them. They donating their time, and I appreciate that. I mean, that's huge. You know what I mean? I just want to introduce you guys. Our guests. Of course, I got Nikki Brown, Dr. Nikki Brown. She is a director of Law Enforcement Training Academy at Odessa College, and she's been in law enforcement for approximately 12, 13 years. She has served as an adjunct for Linwood University. And she's currently serves as the advisor for women's and drones on the fastest growing female-run drone companies in United States. Man, we use a lot of drones lately, so that's pretty cool. Dr. Brown graduated at International Chiefs Police Association Women's Leadership Institute, and she also a member of International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association. Thanks for being here with us, Dr. Brown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
My man, Sergeant Jason Lehman. Sarge, appreciate you being here. Jason Lehman is one of the founders of educational nonprofit organization called Why Will Stop Me. First time when I met him by oh, good Lord. About 5 years ago, he's a public speaker as well. He was in Corpus Christi, and one of his presentations led me to become friends with him till this day, and I really appreciate him. He has made his life mission to fight for equality and in our communities while empowering great leaders to become even better by improving safety during police and public contact. Went to University of South Florida on a football scholarship. He doesn't look like a football player, but I ain't gonna say nothing about that. In 2006, he joined the Long Beach Police Department, and Sergeant Lehman has worked in number of roles with LBPD, and also he was nominated lately, not long ago, for 40 under 40, in Long Beach. Also won as prestigious National Anti-Defamation League's Helen and Joseph Sherwood Award for reducing hate and bigotry in this country. He's currently a police sergeant, where he now supervises a team of motivated police officers who work with West Division Long Beach. Sarge, thanks for being here with me, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm blessed. Thank you.
Last but not least, Professor Bass, Associate Professor of Criminal Justice at Odessa College. He's also advisor for PTK. He's a vet with United States Air Force. He did 18 plus years with a federal probation, graduated of the Federal Leadership Development Program. He's a certified speaker and coach with John Maxwell team. And Will, thanks for being back here at the show with me.
Thanks for the invite, bro.
No problemo. And of course, the topic of today will be, community policing and racism in America, in law enforcement. So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Brown. So do police officers abstain from criticizing bad acts of other officers due to the nature of their jobs?
That's a very broad statement, a very good question. Across the board, there are officers who do speak up and speak out, as we're seeing some police leaders and some police officers speaking out regarding the George Floyd case. So across the board, I cannot say a blanket that all of them are quiet. There are some who do hold officers accountable for the decisions that they make, the tactics that are used.
Sarge, what you think about that?
No, I think that it's when we ask a question and we try to lump any one group in as a whole, we do something called creating a universal, and that leaves for some big issues. If we say all officers do this or all officers do that, we're typically wrong, because all officers don't always follow the rules, and all officers aren't the best, right? It's the majority of the officers that I work with now, they would speak up. They would be there to do things a little bit differently than I believe we saw in the video. There was not only officers that were being aggressive during the contact that we saw with Mr. Floyd, but also officers that chose not to take action. Another really big deal, another really big concern. So I'd like to think that the officers that I know personally, the officers that I work around, would have stepped in definitely sooner. These officers didn't step in at all, but they definitely would have. I believe they would have stepped in sooner. And I believe that that misconduct is being uncovered a lot more frequently now because of peer officers than it ever has been before. Does it still go unnoticed? Does it still go unreported? I would say I would believe yes. I just don't know to what extent.
Okay, Bess, why do you think more officers don't come forward in the situations like this? Because one of your comments on Facebook was in regards, was talking about how some officers, not necessarily disregard what's going on, but they do not, step forward right away to talk about issues like these ones that we're facing today. Did Bess just tap out and left? Bess, are you there with us? I don't know what happened with Bess, but he should be back soon, I hope. For you, Dr. Brown, so what are the challenges that you have faced as a Black female officer during your 12, 13 years career in law enforcement?
There have been several. I've been faced with turning an officer in for wrongdoing. So I know some of the personal and professional impacts that it can have on individuals. I faced some challenges due to my education. And I don't know if that was isolated or because being a female or being an African-American female or just having education period in the departments where I've worked as a law enforcement officer. But each time I've had challenges, I've used those as motivation and I've seen that it's gotten me to the next level. It's very difficult going through them when you know you're qualified, maybe overqualified for something, but for me, it's just using it for motivation. Okay, what else am I able to do? And I know when it's my time, then it's my time to prevail in this particular area.
But like being a Black officer or like a male predominant profession, and also, the majority, I'm not really sure about Missouri or Illinois, but, in Texas, it's a whole lot of Caucasian officers than Black officers. So have you had to deal with anything like that?
Oh yeah, the department I work for in Missouri. Now, what I will say, they treated me more like one of the guys. You know, like, you want to be a police, let's go on and do it. So I don't think there was any differences as far as sex there, or not, at least not from what I experienced from those officers. But when I worked in Illinois, I was one of 2 minority officers, and I could tell there was a difference between departments and in the treatment. And some of it may have been attributed to the department size, that the department in Missouri was more diverse than the department in Illinois. So those things where you kind of see there's a difference, you recognize it, you try not to harp on it too much. And where you're able to stand up for yourself, you do stand up for yourself. And then there are times where you just have to kind of bite the bullet and say, okay, let me let this go. There's another day, another time to address this issue.
Awesome, thanks. Hey, Sarge, so I've met you. I know which kind of person you are. You're outgoing, man. I mean, you have never met a stranger in your lifetime, you know. So you're outgoing type of guy. And I can credit a little bit of that to, you know, being a college athlete as well. But, you know, what is your experience like working, you know, in an area where it's the majority of, you know, African American or Latinos, and you being a white officer? How do you handle that?
So it's interesting, because I do feel like I am definitely part of the majority of police officers, right? Big, bald, white guy. If you think about that, there's a lot of those in the force. Some of that good, some of that maybe not so good, right? But when I go out, I learned the hard way. I learned early on that it was okay to be abrasive. It was okay to be crude. It was okay to do those things. And that was 15 years ago. Throughout my first few years of law enforcement, and without going into my story too deeply, and being involved with serious use of force instances, internal affairs investigations, getting myself into trouble, all those different things, I learned quickly and the hard way that the right thing to do is to focus on your customer, to focus on the person you're serving, and not only to treat somebody the way that you would want to be treated, but to treat somebody the way they want to be treated. And there's a difference there. There's a strong difference there. If I come from a different area and I don't really decide that I'm going to make the place that I police home, that I'm going to call this the community that works with me, the community I serve, then I'm going to get stuck, especially because I don't look like the men and women that I serve. And that's unfortunately right now, I feel a disconnect, an immediate disconnect. You get out of the car as this big bald white guy and you're serving men and women of color. It's incumbent upon you to help to build the respect and the trust that's necessary. I think that a lot of police officers, or a number of police officers who've been doing this for a while, they've had to change their mindset. And if the mindset hasn't been changed, they've run into some very serious walls, which is where I think that we saw the issues in Minneapolis. So what I do is I say, you know what? I am not going to expect that they immediately respect me. That's not what I know. This uniform demands respect and everything else, but I'm not going to expect that. I'm going to expect that they are going to be scared. I'm going to expect that they are not going to know what's going on. I'm going to expect those types of things. I'm also not going to jeopardize officer safety. I'm also not going to, shake hands with somebody who I believe may have just committed an armed robbery or something like that. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to really focus on humanizing my position and working from a place of earning respect throughout the contact, because I think that's very, very important. I think that the person of sound mind who has learned about police community cooperation, for the most part, free of drugs or alcohol, will respect me off the bat. But that doesn't mean everybody's going to do that. And so I take on a little bit of a different role when I go into communities, and I do I try and do the extra. I want to sit down inside of the homes of a African American family. I want to go to a barbecue of a Samoan family. I want to hang out with Cambodian people. I want to spend time with the Hispanics and learn about the Latino culture. I think those things are so very important, so that you know a little bit more and you have a little bit more of a level playing field when you're serving a community that doesn't look exactly like you.
That's a real good point. You talk about earning respect from the people that you serve. In a force, I have served with a lot of Caucasians who never had interaction with black folk. And it's really hard whenever your first call, on patrol is you're supposed to arrest the black guy, but you never had that interaction, that one-on-one with the black guy. So I believe that's what's one of the things that is wrong with the system that we're dealing with. But how can over here, I'm sharing the screen with you guys. One of the things that Chris Rock had said, talking about cops, being a cops, I know it's hard being a cop, but some jobs can't have bad apples. Everybody got to be good, like pilots. American Airlines can't be like most of our pilots like to land. We just got some bad apples that like to crash into mountains. And you think about that, then you think into, he's talking about cops. So, whenever incidents like this happen, we be like, okay, maybe 1 out of 100. But, that 1 out of 100 is the one that cost somebody's life. So how do we get rid of those bad apples in the department? How do we identify those from the get-go, Dr. Brown?
From my experience, a lot of it has to do with the recruiting and training. That's one aspect, because when you're recruiting and they're going through the background, sometimes there are red flags. And sometimes those red flags are indicators of character issues and flaws that will be magnified once training is finished. As a current director and also as a former instructor of an academy, there were recruits that I could just see within 3 months, they're going to lose their job. And lo and behold, there were some that, like clockwork, before they made it off probation, they were fired for one reason or another. And it's like, I could tell you that this person is having an issue in training. They're going to have when that transition from recruit to law enforcement officer takes place, when there is no one watching you like they do in the academy, that person is going to have a character flaw and character issue that's going to be magnified. And then there's some, as they go through the position, go through the job, once they're on, they may get jaded, been passed over for a position or for a promotion, and something within that the culture of whatever department or unit that they're working in, sometimes that thing creates the quote unquote bad apple. But when there's identifiable issues, leadership, management, sometimes even other officers coming forward, and it's easier said than done. A lot of times it's very difficult to do, but somebody has to do it. As a line officer, it may be a little bit more difficult to turn in another brother or sister who works with you, versus the sergeant or above that can hand down that discipline. But just from my experience, I've seen it. I've seen it, and when it's happened, it's like it's no surprise. I could have told you that this person wasn't fit to be a law enforcement officer. But we get into this profession, this occupation, for different reasons and different motivations, and sometimes that has to do with it just before that application is filled out. It's whatever that person's motivation, and then those character issues become magnified through training and sometimes years of experience.
That's good. And Sarge, and then how can we build a culture of good apples in our department? Talking about the recent incident, in Minnesota, the guy, based on his record, you can see that this guy shouldn't be wearing the badge any longer, but was still you know, out there in the streets working. So how do we get rid of that from the get-go?
You know, that question would take me a week to answer fully. But when you think about it, there's a few different aspects. Starts off with recruiting and really having a focus on recruiting from the areas that that the officer is going to be serving. We see that we don't have enough men and women of color on police departments, but where I have a little bit of a disconnect is I want to ask somebody that I serve to become a police officer, but they have been raised not to trust me and have been told that I'm racist. So why would they want to become a police officer? And so this disconnect becomes something that becomes cyclical now. Where do we involve the person of color, the man and woman of color, in becoming a police officer? Where do they find out that this is okay? And where I believe they find out it's okay is in day-to-day police engagement, community engagement. If I'm out there engaging the youth in a community over and over and over again, if I'm engaging via Instagram, Facebook, I'm engaging via all of these non-traditional ways, including the traditional ways, and not only engaging, but gifting. Not just gifting with monetary value, but gifting with care, gifting with the desire to want to be there. Then that can, over time, I believe, supersede some of the other negative ideas that may be coming down and spoken about when it comes to policing. So that's kind of the start, right? And then from there, we have to make sure as police officers that we continue to check ourselves, because as you know, as we're sitting here looking at this and as we're sitting here thinking about it, most people are hired good. They pass a lie detector test, they have a background check, they're hired as good people, and then they go through a high stress academy, they go into a field training system, they get impacted by people that wave to them with one finger instead of five over and over and over again, and trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma builds. And I'm not making any excuse for police decisions, but it is a factor. The PTSD factor is a factor in a over-aggressive police officer every single time that I've seen it. There has been a piece of it where police officers struggle. That specific police officer appeared to struggle dealing with stress, or maybe there was something going on from history that happened. Right? I don't know if 18 IA investigations means that this person shouldn't be a police officer. I'm not going to agree to that, because IA investigations should be getting opened on small things, and whether they're right or wrong, those investigations should take place. And if they're not right, then you can't say because there was 18 that he's a bad guy. I can't fully hold to that. What he did during this incident was a criminal act. And is not to go excused in any way, shape, or form. But I truly think that if we are focusing on humanizing ourselves towards the people we serve, even if they're high, even if they're drunk, whatever it may be, then once we put handcuffs on somebody, something in our head goes off and says, this is a human. This is a human. Yeah, I'm here to detain them, to arrest them. I might have probable cause, but it's a human. And if it's a human, I'm not going to put my knee on a human being's neck. I'm not going to do that. Definitely not for that amount of time. Definitely not if he's handcuffed. So I think it's about the way that we, on a day-to-day basis, engage with the community. I think that would also help with some of the civil unrest that we see, because although this may appear to policing like it's an isolated incident, it's not. It's not an isolated incident. These incidents occur, right? This one is a very bad one, the worst that I've ever seen that was put on camera. But the people that are on the periphery that could be peacefully protesting, if they trust some other police officers, they're rioting because I don't believe they've had that interaction with the police to say, you know what, it might have just been this guy. It might not have been, the other police officers. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. And Will, I see you back.
Yes, man. I'm sorry. I upgraded my internet a couple of months ago, and today was the very first time it decided to go out on me. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Hey,
my apologies.
No problem. Will Smith talks about racism is not getting worse; it's just getting filled. And the other day, you had this comment on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, you know, when I say, and I'm listening to what Jason is saying, and some of what Nikki said. I'm sorry I missed what the other things that you guys said. I'm sure it was outstanding, and I concur and I agree. But one of the things that I feel is that what we try to do is separate policing from the rest of America, as if it's a separate institution, which it is. And so when Jason says that most of the police officers, they come in good, you know, they come in kind of pure, and then, you know, they're hit with all this stuff and it kind of changes some things. I agree that that can very well be the case. But I also know that when they come in, they've been exposed to the same biases that the average citizen is exposed to. Okay, they've been looking at the media, they've been looking at news, they've been having this same thing of believing for some reason that people of color are more of a threat and more of a danger to them, because the numbers play that out. Research has shown that. And so when these police officers, I believe, come into the academy, starting their journey to become police officers, there's already some tank there. And a lot of it is subconscious. So a lot of it is implicit bias. They don't even know that they're having it. And so now we expect these regular, normal people to join this agency and have all of this immense responsibility, but they're immediately supposed to not be the people that they were when they came in. And so to me, it's not just a policing problem, it's a systematic societal problem. Because even the individuals who have the best intentions, they've been indoctrinated all of their lives with certain things, and everybody has biases, everybody. Okay, if you say you don't, you're a liar. It may not be racial. It may be something that you think men drive better than women, or women are more emotional than men. I mean, it could be anything, but we all have them. But I believe that since slavery, there's been a hostile relationship between the African American community and policing. As an African who was not an African American then, but became an African American, their first contact with law enforcement was slave patrols. Okay, so when you saw somebody with a badge, someone who had legal authority over you, it was not going to be good for you. And then as we go through time, we go through the civil rights movement, and we see that policing was used as a weapon against people of color. You know, whether it's hoses sicked on people, dogs sicked on people. And so the conversations that we have are different. Little white kids are told, if you get into trouble, you go find a police officer, you know, they'll help you. Little black kids are told, if you see a policeman, you go the other way. You mind your business, you don't say anything, you stay away from them. You know, we're telling them, hey, you call me, you call your dad, you call your uncle, you call, you know, the neighbor. This is who you call if you get help. But calling a police officer is not on that list. Okay. And so we have to address that thing at its root. And at its root, it's systematic in our society. So even police officers, and I'm not obviously not saying all police officers are rape. I'm not saying anything that's ridiculous.
You better not.
They come in with baggage. Every cadet come in with their own baggage. And yes, they go through the academy, they try to learn some things, try to teach them some things, but it's a small period of time. You know, and I've always said being a police officer is a really, really hard job to have, but it's not that hard to get. And so we have people coming in with baggage, and we're trying to like undo the baggage while piling all these other things on top of them. It's a tough task. It's kind of like our criminal justice system. You know, it's proactive instead of, it's reactive instead of proactive. We're trying to undo some things after it's already been done. We got to catch it at the forefront. At the end of the day, we have to send better people into these positions. And that's a societal problem to me.
Really good point. And Sergeant, I remember whenever I met you over in Corpus Christi, your mentor, Gordon Graham, said one thing that stuck with me till this day. We, as a police department, we are hiring background instead of character. You know, we not looking past whenever we conduct a background to our recruits, we hire to see, okay, have you been caught? Have you done drugs? Have you, whatever the offense may be, most of the people, not most of the people, some people don't have any records of, you know, a felony or misdemeanor on their records due to the fact that they never been caught. But like, when are we gonna stop and we think about, okay, I gotta hire this cadet, I gotta check his character before I check his background, because his background may look good, he never been caught, compared to somebody who have been caught drunk driving and can't apply for a police job ever again just because of that. So, you know, that stuck with me, and is my next question: how do you get your troops, you know, Sarge, to go out and have the same mentality as you, as serve the people, you know, and be that community policing instead of just, you know, be a burden in the community?
All right. So my hamster's sprinting up here trying to follow all this, but I'm going to get you. So Gordon Graham, first of all, is somebody that I have the honor of speaking with monthly, and he has really helped me out, and he talks about different ideas, but one of them is, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And when we talk about character, I believe that the agencies that I've worked with, especially the agency I work with now, the Long Beach Police Department, they are putting forth a ton of resources to try and revamp recruiting and to see what recruiting looks like. Because if you recruit somebody to join the badge, they're joining what it used to be, right? They're joining what they believe the police are. But if you recruit somebody to join a 21st century concept policing, that's a different idea. So if you're recruiting somebody, you say, hey, do you want to chase guns, drugs, and bad guys and put bad people in jail? And they say yes. You might not always get the right cop, not for today's world. But if you recruit somebody and say, hey, do you want to go into classrooms and educate people? Are you okay speaking with family members and explaining what's going on during a traffic stop? Are you okay if somebody were to walk up with a camera and start filming you from a distance that's safe? Are you okay explaining to the media the very basis of what happened? What are your communication skills like in those ways, right? That's a really big piece that I think agencies are trying to add, right? Is how do you sit there and think differently? Because if they need, back in the day, I think that they wanted police officers that were able to be told, hey, you ask them, you tell them, you make them, and you arrest them for these things, you write them a ticket for these things, and you let them go for these things, the end. And that doesn't work today. That doesn't work in the world that I operate in when it comes to policing. Character is a really great idea, and looking into somebody's character is a very good idea. But on that same way, when we're looking at a system, the system would have to be the same for every single person, right? That's why they say, hey, doesn't matter who you are. If you smoked marijuana, you need to wait this many years. If you tried cocaine, you need to wait this many years, right? If you committed a felony, you're out, right? Well, that makes things a little bit more rigid and a little bit harder to test character, I would believe, right? Because somebody made one bad decision, now they're eliminated. Well, I don't know if that always works. Or because somebody made no bad decisions, they're in. I don't know if that always works. So I could see how that works. When supervising police officers out in the field, and I supervise, and I tell everybody I speak to, I walk into rooms and I supervise some of the best police officers in America. And I would not say that in a public forum if it was not true. They are accountable, and they really do care about communities. On Sunday, we are going to be doing a drive-by of a middle school who's graduating from middle school, some kids who are graduating from middle school, but they can't go to their graduation. And we're going to go by and we're going to show them that we're human and that we care, so that if the next day a police officer has to contact them for enforcement, they're hopefully going to see things a little bit differently, right? And that's a very, very, very small piece. But what we talk about is mission, teamwork, and accountability. If we know what our mission is, and our mission is staying safe while building trust, the other stuff that's our job, but that's not our mission. Our mission is staying safe while building trust. We can take somebody and put them in jail, and during that time where we put them in jail, we can build trust through that process. and they made a bad decision and they're going to jail for it, but it doesn't make them a bad person most of the time. It makes them a good person making a bad decision. And then there's teamwork, and how do we work as a team? And that's really where I feel that these Minneapolis guys failed. There's a lot of failures, but the team, 4 guys, right? I tell people I always rode with a partner as a police officer because I wasn't smart enough to work by myself. That was my thing. I needed somebody to say, don't do that, right? Right when I'm about to get going. Don't, hey, wait. And that's how we checked each other. You have 4 paid protectors sworn to uphold the law, to serve and protect, and not one of them could change where things were going. It was, I'm going to do this, and then they were just on the path, and nothing was interrupting those 4. When it comes to teamwork with us, we want to be able to know that we all play different roles within this team, and we all have to be able to do that as we're trying to engage. Some of us like taking photos, some of us don't. Some of us like giving stickers, some of us would rather be doing something else. But we are able to kind of mesh and work together to do that. And the last piece is accountability. Accountability is really important to us. And I think that there are supervisors that I've seen in other agencies that may not put as much emphasis on accountability as they should. And that's where we find some of the officers that have issues or concerns where they may have been able to get retrained or possibly seek counseling or something like that. If you don't get early intervention into that stuff, it becomes habit. And that habit becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And it's harder and harder and harder to intervene. And I think that that's where we, with the department I work for, I think we do a very good job with the accountability piece.
That's really cool. I appreciate that. Dr. Brown,
Yes.
You sent me the use of force for Minneapolis Police Department, and I'm sharing right now. So do you think race had anything to do with this incident?
I don't have enough to say with certainty that race was an issue. I think there's a huge issue with the constitutionality and the application of force that occurred in Minneapolis. Only that officer and the other officers involved will be able to answer if they did something solely based on Mr. Floyd's race. That would be, for me, that would be, I think, irresponsible to say that race was a factor in this particular case. More or less understanding use of force for that department and how the Constitution plays into the errors and issues that will come through, whether through the case or as individuals educate themselves on Minneapolis Police Department's policies, which they do have online.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
Will, what's your opinion on that?
Well, obviously, nobody knows what's inside a man's heart. And so we're speculating. I doubt very seriously that if you ask those 4 officers, one of them is going to say, oh yeah, it's because of race. That's ridiculous. Very few people will admit that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what happens when, in these cases where we'll have a African-American, male, unarmed male, killed by police, that's the first thing people are talking. Is it race related? Is it race related? Is it race related? And I think if you look at every individual instance, you can talk your way out of saying it's not. But if you look at it as a whole, if you look at it, I kind of referred to it in my post that, yeah, these seem like they're isolated incidents, but when you look at the whole big picture, it's happening too much for me, in my opinion, to still feel it's an isolated incident. And so I can't just look at this as those 4 officers and that one African-American man. I have to look at the whole picture and how the fact that an African-American is 3 to 5 times more likely to be killed by police than a white person. I can't ignore that. I can't ignore that. Okay, so I have to look at this thing as a whole. And when I look at it as a whole and I look at the history of our country, because some people can, I can't. I can't ignore how we got to this place. And so when I look at that entire thing, it leads me to believe that the color of that man's skin played a role in how he was treated. And the reason I believe that is because that's not the first time it's happened. That's happened time and time and time and time and time and time and time again throughout our history. So I would feel remiss to say, well, this time I don't know. You know what? After a while, if the same thing keeps happening, it's kind of insanity to think that it's something different. And so do I know a race play to play? No, I don't know, but I do know how the relationship between African Americans and police have been historically in this country. And I do know there is glaring examples of, you see instances where the person didn't seem to be a threat and they were killed. And then because you know the thing about the internet, YouTube and all that, they got stuff everywhere. And you can see other instances where a person who is white, they got guns, they are talking crazy, they look like they're threatening, and nothing is happening. Nothing's happening. And so, yeah, anybody can say, well, we don't know, it's not race. So the default in this country is, since we can't prove it's race related, we're going to say it's not race related. And we have to call it what it is, guys. Whenever there's a shooting, this one case right here is the first time that I've seen so many white people speak out on it. This is the first one, okay? I'm not saying white people never speak out, but this is the first one I've seen so many speak out publicly about this. When there's a shooting like Philandro Castile, Eric Brown, all of these people, whenever there's a killing and there's a poll, because, you know, we polled everything in this country. We always take surveys, we always take polls. The majority of African Americans say, oh yeah, that officer was wrong. The majority of white Americans says, oh no, we think it was okay. Guys, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. We see things through a different prism in this country, from black eyes and white eyes. And we want to talk around it. We want to do all this kind of stuff. But when we don't address it, these kind of things keep happening. So do I think it was race related? Based on what I've read, and I've read a lot. Sometimes I read too much. Sometimes I have to put a book down because I'm getting mad. Based on what I know about the history of this country, based on what I know the history of this country with policing and African-American community, if you're going to make me bet some money, I'm betting big money that the color of Mr. Floyd, George Floyd's skin had, I can't say everything to do with it, but it absolutely played a factor in how he was treated.
I got you. Sarge, so with your program that you have, your nonprofit organization, what impact have you seen that had in your community as far as like community policing and the trust between the public and the police?
Yeah, Why'd You Stop Me is and I guess this is my chance to plug my nonprofit, right? But Why'd You Stop Me is a nonprofit organization that works to partner a police officer and a justice system involved human being. And I only use that term so that we can quickly understand it. But we should not be sitting there and fighting and creating these labels, because it's like Will said, if we have these labels, we're going to hit walls, because if something's happened before, we're going to think it's happening again, right? And so what we do is we try and change that. We train police officers and community members in 2 different trainings. And when we train community members, we teach community members about the reasons why police officers, why just, okay, and ethical police officers may do what they do. We also teach them how to report police misconduct. We teach them how to safely report police misconduct. We build trust in systems that exist. Police officers have to squeeze your fingers at the knuckle line so you can't pull them apart during a search. They have to do that. That's the only technique that's safe. They have to control your hands. But if they're controlling your hands and you have been told that policing is inherently racist and that white police officers are going to do bad things to men and women of color, which is partially understandable to me, okay? I would never be able to fully understand. But if you've been told that and you haven't been told that when a police officer has to search you, they're going to squeeze your fingers, then you may relate this aggressive white police officer and squeezing fingers as to an aggressive act that's going to lead to a fight if you haven't been told that. Our youth in this community of all races should be told why police officers are pointing guns. They should be told why police officers are putting control holds, why they may squeeze your fingers, the fact that handcuffs will come off just as fast as they go on, and what handcuffs are there for. Because the use of handcuffs by an ethical police officer is to mitigate the need for further force or the need for any force at all, right? That is the use of handcuffs, to control somebody. There's a bunch of other uses, but we talk to our youth and our adults in a bunch of different settings. We have one of the nation's only resisting arrest diversion programs. You go through our program after you are arrested for resisting arrest the first time, and you learn, hey, you know what? It might have been a mistake on two sides, and the authority side ended up ultimately winning. I don't know if that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but that's kind of the way it feels. So we talk through that, and we talk through those challenges to authority and how to cooperate with authority to achieve greatness, and how to work with those things. Authority occurs on both sides. Not only the police officer, but community members have a ton of authority, and we have to know what that authority looks like. And then when we train police officers, and it's to Will's point, we train on implicit bias. Implicit bias is huge. The Long Beach Police Department, separate from Why'd You Stop Me, both entities are huge on training on implicit bias, procedural justice, fair and impartial policing. Training on those things, not only by doing book work to check boxes, but by actually doing scenarios. We actually sit there and ask our officers to take a knee and practice giving a child a sticker, to practice responding to a call where a mother is upset that something had happened. And it's really interesting. One of the local community members just told a couple of my rookies right in front of me a few days ago, hey, you got to know something. When you show up, you have to know I'm not going to be happy. That's why somebody called on me, or that's why I called you. It's not going to be a normal situation. It's not going to be fairies and butterflies. You should know that going into it. And that way you can stay calm while other people are elevated and upset. Now that takes practice and that takes work. But what we try and do is we try and see how we can effectively try as police officers to get 2% better every day the right way, and not live in this mediocre state where we do the same thing every single time in the same way. We have to be ongoing to strive to get better in understanding culture, in knowing the people in our community, and in being kind. Kindness is free, but it's really hard to do sometimes when you're a cop. It takes effort. It takes effort to be kind as a police officer, and we have to be able to show that to people. So our procedural justice training, called Community Policing in the 21st Century, is the only state certified post class that travels across the entire state to provide police officers with 12 tools for positive engagement in under 120 seconds on a call by call basis. It gives police officers a tool belt, and you can draw from one tool, next tool, and you can just go ahead and, in a humanized way, in an equal way, with equity, you can teach people how you want to be treated. And that's very, very important for the next contact. Policing, to me, one of the biggest concerns in policing is I can't really tell you that you hurt my feelings. I can't really tell you that what you did was always wrong. I can't really tell you how to do things differently, because in traditional policing, I show up, if you do something wrong and you're not listening, I give you a warning. If you do something wrong and you're not listening, I use force. When you get out of the hospital, you go to jail. All of these different things are happening, but how often are we actually saying, hey, can I tell you something? I would have responded differently if we would have done it this way. This is how things could be safer next time. Could you tell me how I could have done it better? How did you feel during that contact? Those types of ideas help to build the character of the police officers that are out there. It's a self-check system. We have to be constantly looking at how our community is receiving the way that we do business. And I think that's very, very important.
Oh. Dr. Brown, is there racism in law enforcement?
In some, I would say yes. I'm not going to say all departments, but some, yes. I've seen it. I've experienced it. You call a spade a spade. I think when you start talking about even procedural justice, you have to talk about procedural justice within police departments, because there are some issues how police officers treat other police officers that is not already addressed. So before we can even go into the community and expect to have these working relationships with community members, sometimes it's incumbent upon us to look at how we as police officers within are treating, not only from training aspects from the academy, field training programs in service, but the day-to-day roll calls, day-to-day calls and backing other officers. So is it in parts of law enforcement? It definitely, it's in the history, it's in the present. I think one of the important aspects to reflect on is we've discussed these issues, and now it's time to move forward at some point to work on mending what these issues are that we know have been identified year in and year out from past to present.
Got you. Mr. Bass, do you feel like the police are targeting Black people?
Before I answer that, I just want to backtrack and tell you, Jason, that I appreciate what you're doing with your nonprofit. Man, I tell you what, if I can nominate you for Attorney General, I'll do it. I'm not even kidding. I'll do it, because what you're doing is you're being proactive and you're teaching, you know, and I don't want this to be just a one-way thing, because it's a community, policing and citizens need to be taught as well. I've had thousands of conversations with young minority men and women, and I tell them, those police officers want to go home at night. Don't you do anything to make them think they're not going home at night. Okay, so it's accountability on both ends. I just hold police officers to a higher standard because they're the professionals and they're trained, and I expect them to be better than the individuals that they're policing. And by better than, having better emotional control, having the ability to disengage in hostile situations. And so that's what I mean about that. Now, do I think police are targeting? If you go to some communities, you'll see that Hispanics are pulled over more than African Americans. Okay, so that's a broad statement, and I would be remiss to sit here and say that, oh yeah, I think it's a wild world police conspiracy to target African Americans. No, I don't think that is the case. But as I stated earlier, what I believe is, if I'm a young white man, just using this as an example, if I'm a young white man and I've been subconsciously conditioned to believe that a man of color is going to be a bigger threat to me than somebody who looks like me, then am I more predisposed to treat that person as a threat? Probably so. And so do I think the average person in this country, just being an ordinary Joe, if you watch TV, if you listen to the news, if you read stuff, if you watch the movies, can you be preconditioned to believe certain things about certain subcultures in our country? Absolutely. You have to be intentional, because if you're not intentional, man, that stuff will seep into you, and it'll cause you to believe things that, and somebody asks you, why do you think that? And you're like, I don't even know why I believe that. I really don't even know where that came from. Okay. And so, yeah, I think those things will happen. But no, I don't think that people are necessarily being targeted. I don't think there's a police conspiracy to target African Americans. But do I think that African Americans are pulled over, arrested, incarcerated? Well, these are factual things. I don't even have to give an opinion about this. They're arrested more, they're pulled over more, they give higher sentences for the same thing that other people are doing. That's factual information. And so we have to acknowledge that that's real. And so the question is, why is that happening? Why are Black people pulled over more? Why are they in prison more for selling drugs and using drugs when white Americans sell more drugs and use more drugs? We have to ask ourselves those questions. And so that's the question that I continue to ask myself. But no, Matai, I don't think that there's a police law enforcement conspiracy that when you swear in, it's like, okay, you know what, this is what we're going to do. No, I don't think that's the case at all. But I do think that there are some biases in there. And I think it comes from living in this world. That's why I appreciate what Jason's doing, talking to young kids and letting them know, hey, this is why we do what we do. And then teaching his officers, this is how we're going to act with this group. And I think those things combined is the way that we get past this thing. But unfortunately, those things don't happen in every city or every department like it's happening there. And that's unfortunate, because I think that's a beautiful thing that you're doing.
So this question goes for all you three. How do we avoid incidents? I mean, what happened in Minnesota? How do we avoid that?
Well, I got an idea, and I don't mean to jump in. I'm sure, you know, we are such a powerful group, the four of us. And when we think about the power that we have, what we often don't think about is that we're working towards a common goal in a different way. And if we want to try and win and score a touchdown, but we just want to run towards the sidelines, we're never going to score a touchdown. But we'll all be running. We won't stop running. And what Will says can be taken. And Will, I really appreciate where you're coming from with this, because if all of us were on the exact same plane, this would be a really boring podcast, right?
Right.
It wouldn't quite make sense, because we have representation from different mindsets, and
Right.
that's good. But what I think could be done better is, I believe that I know as a police officer what community members would need to know to get through this. I believe, Will, that you know what police officers need to know to get through this.
Right.
And we oftentimes don't come together. We oftentimes speak to our individual groups.
Right.
And so, Will, if you are telling young men and women of color, and by the way, I'm not asking you to stop doing this, but I'm just throwing this out there in the conversation. If you are saying, hey, police officers hurt Black people 3 to 5 times more frequently than any other race, and you don't have time to spend months with them to talk through what that means, you could be telling somebody, I need to fear every police officer. And if you're telling somebody I need to fear every police officer, the fear response, studied, tried, proven, and true, is I have a greater chance of engaging in violence when I'm scared. Right?
Right.
When somebody tells me to put my hands up and I'm scared, I don't listen. So what do? I keep my hands down. All of these different things, when the fear response happens, right, that tunnel vision comes in, and now we get in this little small tunnel. That becomes a concern. Where on the flip side, if you tell police officers, hey, be hyper scared of men and women of color, it's the same thing that's probably going to happen. And again, I believe that police officers need to be professional in what they do. They need to train for this stuff, but they also do have to have an understanding that fear does play a part in their job, right? Fear is what keeps people alive on both sides. So I'm not saying to discount the fears, but I think that if we start working towards understanding what the good in each of the agencies, each of the different groups does, that might be a better starting point from today forward. Recognizing the bad, understanding how to uncover the bad, trusting in the internal and external affairs reporting process, because trust me, it works. And I think that Nikki could probably attest to it working. Sometimes it's broken, but it does work. And if nobody gets reported, misconduct doesn't get reported, we're really stuck. We're really, really stuck. We need that to be reported on the small percentage of police officers that are out there doing the wrong thing. And they exist, they're out there. But we sit there and we think about these different ideas. If I can find a way to look at the good in the area that I go to, then when I go there, I'm going to start from the good. And if men and women of color can look at the good in the police officer that is probably going to contact them, not discounting fears, not discounting the understanding that things could happen, but if we look at the good, then I believe that fear will be reduced. And if fear is reduced, then we will have less uses of force. And hopefully we will have police officers that stick around because they want to be nice, not police officers that stick around because they want to be a part of a brute gang. Because old school policing days are done. We should be in police squad meetings talking about the good things we did in the community, not talking about getting in fights or how cool it was to, hurt somebody or X or Y or laughing at death or whatever, even though some of that is part of the coping mechanism. We should be focusing on positive engagement. And I would hope it will be the same thing in the home of a young African-American kid. I hope that we could get to a point where we say, hey, look, these things could happen. Know that. This is how you can get past them. But The majority of the cops are good people you can trust. The majority of the cops, no matter what they look like, are people that are doing things that are for your benefit. So here's how you're going to get through the contact safely. I believe that there should be ways to train everybody how to get through a police community contact. But if we learn how to train men and women of color how to get through a police community contact, that's super scary. If I got to take that course, I'm scared. I don't want the course of going through how to be trained as a person of color. I want the course of going through how to be trained as anyone. And I feel that really will play a part into changing some of this. Are we still going to have bad apples? And I believe it's even worse than that. I believe it's rotten, horrible, cracking seeds, dripping, oozing apples. I mean, horrible, right? Are we still going to have those? I believe that, unfortunately, because we're human and we have 800,000 law enforcement officers going into 2 million police community contacts a day, 2 million a day. We are going to have some. But if we could look at the 2 million contacts and go, you know what, maybe 20,000 of those could have been done better, but the other 1,999,000, and 80 or whatever, right, have been done well, then I think we're working from a place of peace and not a place of coming from violence or fear. That's just my belief.
Want to say something, Nikki?
Well, first, thank you, and Jason, it's been a very spirited conversation. A couple of things. Dr. David Schwartz mentions in his book that action cures fears, and also knowledge and action is power. So I think it's very important to state that this is a time for action, and use that action to mitigate fear among community members. When I had the opportunity to be an instructor in Missouri in the police academy, and I got to work with the Department of Justice following Ferguson, one of the things we worked on was the curriculum. So a big piece was implementing how can we incorporate citizen training in law enforcement training, and that led to a community engagement position for St. Louis County Police Department. But that piece, like Jason states, as far as having the community members trained on what police do, because some get their information from social media, some get it from television programs, and they have the possibility of being skewed with what they see, and also coupled in with their experiences. So that action piece, educating, working together, also holding police officers accountable from the background process to training in an academy. When those character issues are discovered, they have to be addressed. It's not one of those, hey, let's just kind of see and wait, and maybe this person will get over themselves. Sometimes those have to be cut off at the pass. And once we identify, whether in training or in law enforcement circuits and culture, still do that same concept. Do I think it's possible to mend some of the issues? Yes, it's going to take time. It's going to take transparency. It's going to take some of us, stepping away from, let me not be selfish in this moment, and give the citizens an opportunity to vent when they need to vent, but still, hold your tactical prowess when you're doing so. Will, also, you mentioned that these conversations that sometimes I personally wasn't taught to dislike police. Some of my disdain for law enforcement came once I got to college, but for me it was, Nikki, you need to know what police do. You have to take a different route because you weren't taught by your family to dislike police. But now that you're in college, you don't like police, and that's an issue from everything that you've been taught. So for some of us, just saying, it's doable. The programs that are being created, this innovation, this technology, to figure out ways that let's move forward. Sometimes it means apologizing. Sometimes it means the bad apples have to be, you fire them, indict when they're indicted. Prosecuted. Sometimes that's the way. So I think for me, just transitioning outside of law enforcement, I had to reevaluate my career and to see where could I best make the most impact. For 12 years, it was the law enforcement. It was being on the street, running and gunning, and in the academy. And now making that transition to an academy director, that's what I saw my role. So Jason, thank you for when we recognize what we're able to do individually and collectively as a group. So I'm looking forward to working with Will, I'm looking forward to, Jason, we have the opportunity to speak again and collaborate. Matthias, always enjoyable to speak to you. So I look forward to that piece where we are able to collaborate to move this forward and find out, you know, how we can repair the issues between communities and law enforcement. Will?
Thank you for that, Dr. Nikki Brown. Collaboration really is the key to what you said. And Jason, I just want to, maybe this will help you sleep a little better at night. You know, Matthias asking pointed questions, which I appreciate. I mean, this is not a topic we need fluff. He's asking direct questions and I'm giving him direct answers based on my opinions. Matthias sat in the room with me talking to at-risk kids. And never will an at-risk kid hear me bash the police. I'm all about personal accountability. So when I'm talking to minority youth, I'm not even worried about the police. What I'm telling them is this is the behavior that you're going to have to do. This is what you're going to have to do. So I'm all about the personal accountability. If I'm in a room full of police officers, that's when I'll throw out that ratio that maybe you need to ask why 3 to 5 more Black people are killed. You know, that's who I'll talk to about that. Okay. And so, no, because I'm aware that I would create bias myself if I was to start denigrating a certain culture and then have the audacity to tell police not to be biased. So no, I don't do those things. Okay. So I don't tell minority. I have a son and I've been in law enforcement, not a police officer, but with the federal courts and worked with police officers. And obviously I teach it on a collegiate level. I teach at the police academy. So I am very pro law enforcement. It's a necessary element of our society and I want us to be better at it. And so this is how I feel I can do my part. So I talk to youth, at-risk youth, trying to educate them. And then I try to educate individuals going into law enforcement. But Nikki said it perfectly. There has to be collaboration and people have to come to the table. And education is so, so, so important. I mean, anybody who knows me, they know I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence. And I believe that we teach ourselves to be one way. We can certainly teach ourselves to be another way. And I believe a lot of bad behavior, not just in police officers, but in just regular human beings, comes from a loss of emotional control. You know, people get in their feelings and they allow their emotions to overtake what they intend to do and things get out of control. And so I think that's something that we need to work with citizens. We need to work with children, with adults, with police officers. We all have to realize that we can be triggered and we have to be aware. And we have to look at the outcomes that we want and we have to ask ourselves, what do I need to do to get the outcome that I want? And then you do that thing. And I don't think anybody does enough of that. The emotion hit and we act on it. And so, but we do. We have to work together. The community, I don't like that us versus them mentality. Yeah. You know, and I know that I missed that part. My internet went out when you guys were talking about do police, you know, hold each other accountable and that sort of thing. Yeah. And I kind of liken it to the military. Sometimes when you are in that type of environment, I was in the military and you're working so close with your brothers and sisters, you do get that group mentality like, hey, we got to have each other's back. And if you're not careful, you would interpret that me having your back as to me to allow you to do something wrong and not be accountable for it. Okay, that's human nature. That's human nature. I mean, I have a brother. If my brother did something wrong, I'm really gonna have to check myself to realize that, hey, by covering for him, am I helping him or am I hurting him? And so I think that's a natural thing. And so I believe because the nature of the job in policing, and it's a very, it's a difficult, it's a complicated job and you're working with people and people are very complicated. I believe because the nature of it, police officers do have a tendency to gravitate more to each other. Police officers typically hang out with nothing but other police officers or their families and things of that nature. And so if we're not careful, it becomes a us and them. And that's the thing that it destroys us and divides us. And because we're all in this thing together, officers and community. And so we have to do things together. We have to talk together. We have to learn together. We have to grow together. And together, to me, that's the key word. We have to do these things together. We can't expect police to fix this. We can't expect the community to fix this. We got to fix it together. We created this together. We got to fix it together.
Man, that's really good points from all of you three. Is anybody watching the interview right now has any question for our guests? You can raise your hand, and I put you unmute
Jessica.
yourself.
Yeah, I can see Jessica raising her hand.
Jessica. Oh,
Mike.
Jessica. Okay, my bad. Jessica, go ahead. My
She
bad.
needs to unmute. She needs to unmute.
There you go, Jessica.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Jason knows, my son has autism and he has a sensory processing disorder. And Jason was talking about how they do the squeezing of the fingers. Are officers trained for people that have special needs and sensory disorder? Because like you can poke him, and to him a poke is like you're beating him. So you're going to get a really foul response from someone that has a sensory processing disorder.
Good point, Jessica. And when I was the training coordinator for the police academy, of course, we had those kind of trainings, but I don't believe it's enough. You know, I just don't believe we train enough. And the other day I made a comment about training, and I'm not just talking about like the physical, talk about defensive tactics. I'm talking about emotional intelligence. I'm talking about, community policing, all this kind of training, dealing with autistic kids. It can't just be just 8 hours every year. You know, it has to be something continually so we know who we're dealing with and what we're dealing with. So there's training like that, but it needs to be more, in my opinion.
Yeah, I never thought of it until he mentioned the squeezing of the fingers, and I was like, oh, that would not be good.
And I see that Tamika. Oh, okay. She was just commenting. Anybody else? I guess nobody else has any comments right now. Let's see this. Go. Jason, Nick, and Will. Anything else that you guys would like to share with the group right now?
You know, I just, on a personal level, I mean, you know, as a person who served their country, and I've been in public service for, you know, pretty much most of my adult life, and it hurts my heart because I know what America can be. You know, the coronavirus just jacked up everything. You know, I called her a whore. She just messed up everybody's life. She did. Y'all know she did, right? She just messed up some stuff. One of the things that bothered me the most that we're not having were the Olympics. And I'll tell you why. It's not just because I'm a huge sports guy, but it wasn't that. The thing I love the most about the Olympics is that when we're watching the Olympics, we look at that uniform. We look at that stripes. Even if it's a sport that we didn't even know was a sport. Even if it's like ping pong, and we're like, is that an Olympic sport? Well, I'm a root for the American. And I'm like, that's how we can be. That's how we can be, where it's like all that, this don't even matter. Are you one of us? Well, you good. Let's do this thing, okay? And so I love the Olympics because I see America rooting for just America. You don't care if that athlete is black, brown, green. You don't care. They got on them they got on those stripes, those stars. We're rooting for them. And so it hurts my heart when things are like they are, because I know the beauty of what we can be and what we should be. And it's amazing when it happens. You know, like September 11th, I think pretty much everybody on here is probably old enough to remember that. How America was after that was a tragedy. But man, how America acted toward each other after that was just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, because it was nothing but love. And so we can be that. We've had a history of not being that, but I just don't want to think that we can't. I believe that we can. And when it comes to policing in our community, I think we can start there. We can start there, and we can treat each other better, and we can learn from one another, and we can check ourselves and admit things to ourselves. Be honest to yourself. Do I feel I don't like police? Be honest. If that's what you feel, be honest about that. Then you got to start digging in. Why don't you like police? Has a police officer ever done anything to you? Well, no, he did to my uncle. well, what did your uncle do? Well, yeah, I mean, my uncle did do this, but I mean, and then the more we flesh that thing out, we'll realize, well, you know what? Man, my uncle got some issues, okay? And so those are the kind of things that we need to do. We need to be accountable to ourselves and to each other and be better with each other.
Nikki, would you like to go or would you like me to go?
What I have is real quick. Thank you so much. Again, that action piece, that conversations like this definitely put a mark, and then we carry those conversations into action in our respective fields and what we're doing, whether it's the classroom, boardroom, on the street, with citizens. I think that piece is, we have these difficult conversations, whether we agree or not, and then we take those and we put some action behind it.
Awesome. Well, Matai, thank you so much. I want to start off, and I'm sure that everybody here will echo this. We probably just haven't thought to say it, but just a few days ago, a guy named George Floyd was murdered. And I just want to take a moment to really pay my respects for the situation and for his family. Right now in Minneapolis, police officers are, the good police officers are risking their lives trying to battle something that those police officers, the individuals, had nothing to do with if they weren't there. And the system had something to do with this, but those individuals, the good ones that were hired, they may not have had anything to do with this. And then there are men and women of color who are separate from the situation, who are taking it to different levels. And those levels, they're there because that's their belief system. And I respect belief systems and I respect ideas, but I don't want us to leave this without saying, God bless Minneapolis, Minnesota. I think that it's a place right now that's got to be a very, very hard place to be in. My fear as we leave this is that a police officer will unfortunately be targeted for this. And the unfortunate part is it's going to be the wrong police officer. And that's really, really unfortunate. I think targeting anyone is wrong, but I think it's going to be bad. On the flip side, as Will has spoken about, I don't know how much this is going to help police community relations in general. So we are going to have to take action, like Nikki said. We're going to have to move forward. The classroom is, wherever that classroom is going to have to translate to real life behaviors and behaviors that stick. And I hope that we can take the ideas of fairness on both sides, the value of voice on both sides, the importance of transparency on both sides, looking at impartiality on both sides, and find equity in our communities, equity that's valuable, equity that's tangible, equity that allows us to feel safe, whether we're the one doing the traffic stop or whether we're the person going 12 miles an hour over the speed limit, which is exactly what I did today coming here. So we have to sit there and we have to think about all of those things. And I just hope that as we leave here, that we can promise to ourselves, especially the people that are watching this, that we'll get better. We'll fight to get 2% better on a daily basis because we don't know it all and we're always learning. And at the end of all of our board meetings with Why'd You Stop Me, we say a series of words and they mean something. And those words are, you can count on me. And I mean that when I say it, and I think everybody here believes that. You can count on me to do my part. Will, I'll tell you, there's one thing I never chose. I never got to choose it, and it was the color of my skin. And although I'm not an African American, I'm here to defend all people. And I hope that police officers understand that their job is to defend all people. And we have to think about those kinds of things. We are here to protect people that at times can't protect themselves. We are not here to hurt people that cannot protect themselves. And we have to be focused on that. We are going to use force when force is necessary. But outside of that, we have to sit there and be human, and we have to be kind to people. So, Matai, thank you so much for having us. To everybody on the panel, I'm going to say this, and I know our nonprofit director is going to say something, but I will fly myself out to both of your locations and put on whatever type of program I can to help the people that you represent, whether it be at the academy and the officers you're training, whether it be at your college and your classroom. We can make this happen free of charge, and I will do that because Matai is a really good friend of mine, and he brought me on here. And now, after I get off of this, because I'm sure one or two of them are watching it, I will answer as to why I just offered that up. But it's going.
Well, you know what,
it's going
Jason,
to happen.
if it makes them feel better, you can get a 2-for-1 because me and
Yeah.
Nikki in the same place. So you got
We're in business. All right. All right. Cool.
Man, Jason, I just want to say that, you know, even though that you didn't choose your skin color, you're halfway black with your bald head. You know what I mean?
my brother in baldness.
Hey, man, I just want to thank you guys. Thank all of you guys. I know this is a very delicate subject, and but you know, people don't understand. Will, you're John Maxwell, public speaker. Jason, you have done so many speaking events. Nick, you're busy as it is. I mean, you guys took time out of your day just to be here with us and to share your knowledge, your expertise. That's big. That's great. And I greatly appreciate that because, you know, 1018 Service is just a podcast, you know, with a goal to educate people and let people know what both sides are doing, not just the police, but the community as well. You know, it's so many good things are being done there that people don't know about it. And I wanna help put that out there. And I want to thank you guys once again for being here with me. And before I leave, yeah, see this? Yeah, Cowboys, baby, Cowboys, Cowboys. I don't know where you guys are, but here we Cowboys all day.
Boy, but Ty, you and Skip Bayless, man, y'all internal optimists, boy. I tell you,
Oh,
they
man.
ain't gonna trick me no more, brother. They ain't tricking me no more.
No, man.
I ain't falling for it.
Yeah, Cowboys all day. Jessica, I know you're 49 as well. I'm a Cowboys diehard for life. Go Packers, no. That's how we got to finish this interview. But thank you guys. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have the rest of a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matai.
Thank you.
Bye.
Six-year-old EMT was killed in Mid-Mark after police forced their way into her home that night.
Once again, thank you.